Hi, welcome. Okay, so going to do another practice teach, and this time doing something a little different. This isn't actually going to be asana focused. I want to talk a little bit about some yoga philosophy. So, a lot of times when we think of yoga, we do specifically think of what is actually the asana, the physical practice of the poses, the movements. And unfortunately, yoga can get treated like it's just some basic form of exercise, when it's inherently so much more than that, so much more than that. So there are many aspects to what yoga is. Asana, the physical practice of the yoga poses, is just one branch of the tree that is yoga. There's also things like concentration and mindfulness and just, so many other layers. The layer I want to talk about right now is there are what are called the yamas, which are sort of restrictions. They're sort of ideas for right ways of living. And then there's the observances, which are the niyamas, which again are a form of concept for right ways of living. There's 5 yamas, there's 5 niyamas, and I thought today I would specifically talk about the Yama of Ahimsa. Ahimsa is the concept of no harm. So when you first hear that as part of yoga, the idea is no harm. Okay, well, obviously no physical violence, right? But again, it really runs so much deeper than that. What do we actually mean when we say no harm? What does it mean in our day-to-day lives to live a life with no harm? And I think the most important thing, as far as just my personal understanding at this point in my life, right now today, is this concept of no harm, this concept of ahimsa. Again, goes much deeper than like physical violence. It's also about emotional harm. It's about psychological harm. But really critically, one of the things I want to point out right now is that it has to begin with us and not creating harm to ourselves. So if I'm truly living with this concept of ahimsa, then I'm not doing things that will create harm for me. That can look a lot of different ways. If I know that certain decisions, certain choices, certain things, for example, that I could eat, or other things that I could do, such as drinking or using substances, those things are creating harm for me. So ahimsa would guide us that it's important that we take a look at that and we not do things that harm ourselves. We not bring things into our body that would be harmful. That's one example. In my asana practice, many of us, again, especially here in the West, asana, yoga has been equated with asana. So where does the concept of ahimsa come with that? Well, one way, and again, keeping to that concept right now of like how we can personally begin by applying this concept to our own selves before we start looking at applying it to others. If I allow myself to look at asana as just another form of exercise, and then I allow this sense of competitiveness, whether that competitiveness is with the person on the mat next to me, or whether that competitiveness is just in my head with what I feel like I should be able to do. It's easy for me to push my body to a point where I'm actually creating harm. So my actual practice of the yoga poses, my asana practice, instead of benefiting my body, instead of helping my body, instead of encouraging a state of like relaxation and connection, I am actually potentially harming my body because I'm not paying attention to my own body's signals that I'm trying to do something, or I'm insisting on moving my body in a way or forcing my body into a certain way that doesn't fit for my body. So a lot of times this is why it's so important in the practice of our asana that we be open to realizing the instructor, the teacher is just a guide. At the end of the day, it's your practice, and you are the best expert on what's happening in you. So, for example, if you're being cued to do a pose that, like down dog, and maybe down dog for most people supposedly should feel comfortable, but it's causing a lot of pain in your wrist, there needs to be modification. There needs to be modification, and modification is the appropriate and healthy choice at that point. And it goes back to that concept of ahimsa, that I'm practicing in a way where I'm not creating harm for myself. And again, then from there, this concept of ahimsa, just gets bigger and bigger and deeper, like this idea of not harming, not harming animals, even when they're spunky, not harming the people around us. And again, that doesn't mean just physically, but also just being thoughtful and wise with our words, and not being cruel with our speech, being fully present for those that need us as much as we can, so that they feel supported and cared for. Many ways in which ahimsa can show up in our lives. That is the first of the 5 yamas, and hopefully I did an okay job explaining this and describing it. Let me know if this made sense to you. Let me know what you think. Like I said, this is a new one for me as I'm practice teaching here, to practice something other than the meditation or the breath work or the asana, but to really practice trying to break down and explain one of the principles. So appreciate your support, and let's move forward with practicing some ahimsa, especially for ourselves, each and every day. Thank you, and take good care of you.